Hi everyone, it's Samantha, the Adult Services Librarian at the Winona Public Library. And today I want to talk to you about fake news and how we can tell if something is fake or not. So to get started, we're going to talk about Facebook and thinking before you click, and then we'll move into Google and thinking before you click. And then we're going to talk about what happens when you actually click on something and how you can tell if it's fake or not. And then we'll end it. So let's go ahead and get started. So here are some things that I found on my Facebook page. We'll just take a quick look at them. These all come from different pages, not friends, but pages on my Facebook page. The first is the Friends of the Rochester Public Library. And then another resource that was suggested to me called Her View from Home. Then we have KTTC TV, another suggested website called or Facebook page called The Delight. Something from the River 101.1 FM, and then something that was suggested to me from Facebook called Positively Positive. So I want to get started by saying that if the resource comes from your Facebook friend or a page that you know and are familiar with on Facebook, it does not always mean that what they are posting, as far as links go, are safe and or correct or true. So let's get started with pages that I know and am familiar with. So we've got the Friends of the Rochester Public Library, the River 101.1 FM, and KTTC TV. The first thing I'm going to do is check to see if the links that they are sharing are similar to the page name. So you can see the Friends of the Rochester Public Library have usnews.com, the River sharing something from winonaschools.org, and then KTTC has something from kttc.com. So only one has a link that is similar to the page name. So at that point, I might deem this link safe for me to click on because not only is it something I'm familiar with, but the website also matches the page name. Now, what about the other two that have different links than their name? So we'll move into the Friends of the Rochester Public Library and the River 101.1 FM. So their links don't match, but do they look familiar? So the Rochester Public Library, the Friends of the Rochester Public Library, have usnews.com. Now, I myself am not familiar with this, so this is a link that I probably would not be familiar with and want to click on. However, the River shares something from winonaschools.org. Winonaschools.org is familiar with me because it is what Winona Area Public Schools uses. Okay, let's talk about Facebook again. So when it comes to Facebook, sometimes they suggest things to you that might be something what we call clickbait. Clickbait is things that sound interesting that we might want to click on. So these are the three I'm not familiar with. Again, it's Her View from Home, Positively Positive, and The Delight. And again, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the websites or the Facebook pages I was familiar with. And I'm going to check the link that it's associated with. So Her View from Home has a link called herviewfromhome.com. Not familiar with it. Positively Positive has innerstrengthzone.com. Not familiar with that either. And The Delight has something from thedelight.com. Again, I am not familiar with any of these links. So am I going to click on them? No. However, I do recognize that two of them sound familiar. John Krasinski brings us some good news, and Jimmy Fallon and the Roots with Meghan Trainor sing all about that bass. Those sound familiar. So one thing I might want to do is look up some keywords from that story. I'm going to go back for a second because the one from the Rochester Public Library, that story also sounds familiar. So again, I'm going to use keywords to look up and find out if there are similar stories. So we're going to go now to the next slide, and we'll talk about some good news from her view from home. Okay, so I'm going to Google some keywords, John Krasinski and some good news. And that's going to bring up 3 different Google links, and they are from The Verge, Market Watch, and USA Today. Now, I am familiar with USA Today, so I would likely click on USA Today. I would not click on that Facebook post because I am not familiar with it. But because it is mentioned by the USA Today, I would likely click on it, and it would be safe for me to click on. Okay, another example, I mentioned Jimmy Fallon and Meghan Trainor and the Roots singing All About That Bass. So when I Google that, I'm getting 4 different links. I get one from the HuffPost, Billboard.com, Time.com, and Spin.com. I am familiar with all of those links except for the bottom one, Spin.com. HuffPost is a newspaper. Billboard, it comes from the Billboard music charts, and Time is Time magazine. So I would likely click on any of those 3 links, but I would not click on that Facebook link, Positively Positive, because I do not know that website that it is sharing. Now let's talk about Google and how we know if it's safe or true from Google. So the search I used was COVID-19, since it's relative to now. Here are 6 stories that popped up. Here are the ones I'm familiar with. So I'm familiar with NBC News, NPR, and CNN.com. I am not familiar with Live Science, Fox 6 Now, and WLUC. Not familiar with those, but I am familiar with the other 3. So, if I'm familiar with them, does that mean I should necessarily click on them? No. The next thing I need to do is take my mouse and hover over the title of the article. So here's the NPR one. So I hover over it, and then at the bottom of my screen, it tells me that it is from npr.org. So this would be safe for me to click on because I know that website. I know that NPR is npr.org. It's not something from like covidinfo.com, which is something I wouldn't be familiar with. So then I won't click on it. And sometimes we have that with things in Google where it'll say one thing in the title, but then if I hover over the link, it's going to show me something else. So that is why we always hover in Google before we click. So let's say we are familiar with Billboard.com and we click on that article. But what makes that information true or relevant to us? The first thing we're going to do is check out the author. Most news articles that we share have a link in the author's name so that we can learn more about them. So if we click on that author's name, it brings us to this next page. On this, it's going to share a bunch of articles that she wrote, but also a link to her Twitter account. And her Twitter account says that she's an entertainment editor for Mashable, and she formerly worked for the Billboard and Entertainment Weekly. So it's possible that she's very relevant because we have a little bit of background information on her. A lot of times my favorite websites are ones where if I click on the author's name, and it tells me a little bit about the author. The Winona Daily News, for example, does a great job of this. If I click on one of their authors or reporters' names, it's going to tell me that they're a reporter and how to get a hold of them. So another thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at the date. How current is the information? So this particular article comes from 2014. It is almost 6 years old. So it's a little old. But how do I know that this information still might be relevant to me? Well, if I scroll to the very bottom of Billboard's website, it has a copyright date, and that copyright date says 2020. So that tells me that all of their other information that they're posting is up to date and relevant and current. So this is just an article in their backlog of information. Okay, next, I'm going to look for other information that comes from other sources in that website. So in the article, it has a picture from NBC. And NBC, I'm familiar with that website, so I know that this information backs up this author's story. It also has a YouTube link to Jimmy Fallon and Meghan Trainor with The Roots, and the YouTube link comes from The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Familiar with that show? Okay, so after we've done all that, we also need to ask ourselves, what kind of website is it? What are we looking at it? Is it a personal page like a blog or a resume profile? Is it a special interest site? These are sites often hosted by nonprofits or activists. Special interest sites, they want you to go for their cause and support their cause. Not all special interest sites are bad. A professional website is something from an institution or a professional organization. So it would be something from like a college university or a well-known organization like the American Cancer Society or the CDC. And then there's also news and journalistic sites. So does it have news that looks relevant? Is it national, international, local, or is it magazine news? So this particular website, the Billboard.com, would most likely fall under magazine news because it's entertainment news. Or is it a commercial website? Commercial websites are often made for businesses, and people often sell things from commercial websites. So what do we look for in the URL after we click? So the URL is the web address that appears at the top of your screen. It's either going to end with an edu, a .gov, a .org, a .com, or a .net. And .edu is an educational website, like Winona State's is winona.edu, or St. Mary's is smumn.edu. .gov, so this is things like irs.gov, CDC, and then we have .org. .org is an organizational website. So again, I mentioned the American Cancer Society is a really good example of this because it ends with .org. So then there are commercial websites that end with .com. Not all commercial websites are bad. So for example, on one end of the spectrum, we have something like Facebook.com. That's a commercial website. Or we have something like cityofwinona.com. So totally on the opposite sides of the spectrum, both are considered commercial websites because of how their domain ends. And so just because it ends with a .com does not mean that it's irrelevant to us. Some of those .coms might have informative information on them, like City of Winona. And then we have .net. .net is a network infrastructure. It's often used for technology websites. A great example of this is Charter.net or Spectrum.net. Both of them are in the technology realm. They provide us with internet, so they're going to end with a .net. So after we click on that website, these are just things I want you to remember or when you are looking up information on it to make sure if it's legit or not. First, is there an author listed? If there is an author, it's likely legit. Check and see the author's background though. If there's no author, how do we know if it's true or not? Is there a copyright date? If there's no copyright date, we don't know if the information is relevant or up to date or any of that kind of things. Next is the website bias. So if it leans in one direction and doesn't have both sides of the case, is it biased. Does it lean one way more than the other? Then it's likely not a it's likely not a true resource, because we want something that is going to be non-biased and tells us both sides of the story. And then we're going to ask ourselves, what kind of website is it? So remember that whole um, is it a blog or is it an educational institution? So if it's me writing my own thoughts, it might not necessarily be true because I'm just giving you my opinion, therefore making it a biased website. Or if it comes from something educational, they're going to give you a little bit of both sides of the story and be a non-biased resource. Finally, what's in the URL? How does it end? Again, we have the whole .com thing. Just because it ends with a .com does not mean it's always true. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So cityofwinona.com, true. That's where I'm going to get my information about the city of Winona. If I go to facebook.com, is all of that information true? Not always. So those are things that we want to check when it comes to fake news. Finally, that's the end of this presentation. This presentation is an updated presentation that I have given twice on website credibility or web credibility. So before it was called fake news, it was actually known as web credibility. I first gave this presentation in 2008 for St. Cloud State University's Information Media Department, and then again in 2012 for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Master of Library and Information Sciences program. If you have any questions about fake news, or if you're not sure a website is fake news or not, feel free to email the reference department. You can email the reference department directly at winonapl@selco.info, or you can email me directly at sturbeast@selco.info. Sturbeast is my maiden name, so that's why it's that way. And then finally, my phone number. The reference phone number is 507-452-4860. If you have a question on a site, feel free to give us a call about it. We might not be in the building, but we are answering the phone. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope you've learned something about fake news and whether or not you should click on it. Things I want you to take away is if you are unfamiliar with it, do not share it, do not click on it. It's probably not true if you're probably not familiar with the link. And then ask yourself questions about the website once you're in it. Who wrote it? Is there a date? Is this website relevant? Does it lean one way? So just remember those things as your takeaway from this presentation. Thanks.